Hello everyone. Today I will explain the cardiac cycle. But before we start the process, at first let's recap uh, something about the heart structure. Okay? So at first, let's remember the different parts of heart so that you know what happens in one cardiac cycle. All right. So you know, the human heart is a four chambered, fist sized muscular organ. It has four chambers, right? And these four chambers are divided into two halves. So the first structure that we need to mention is what is the septum, okay? This one, the one that I am going to point. So this is a septum. It's a wall that separates or divides the heart into two halves, the left half and the right half. In each half there are two chambers. The upper two chambers are called atria or atrium singular. Atria or atrium singular. So there is the right atrium and the left atrium. The lower two chambers are known as ventricles, the left ventricle and the right ventricle. Okay? You just focus on what I'm pointing. So this is the heart. What else? There are valves, which are tongue-like structures that can separate or that can connect different heart chambers. These two valves are known as atrioventricular valves. This is a general name. But they have other names used. For example, the left atrioventricular valve, the one that I am pointing now, is also known as mitral valve. This valve prevents the backward flow of blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium. This is the role of all valves. They prevent the backward flow of blood. The right atrioventricular valve is also called tricapsid valve. Tricapsid valve. There are two more valves. One of them is called the pulmonary valve, okay, because this valve leads to the pulmonary artery. The other valve on the left side of the heart in a similar place or location is called the aortic valve because this valve connects the left ventricle with the aorta, the largest artery. Alright, the aortic and pulmonary valves, they also have another common name called semilunar valves. Semilunar valves. So you can say the left semilunar valve when you want to describe aortic valve, and you can also say the right semilunar valve referring to the pulmonary valve. What else? The heart is also supplied by blood vessels. What type of blood vessels? Arteries and veins. Two large veins called vena cava, okay, the superior and inferior vena cava, you see the blue ones, because they are colored with blue as they bring deoxygenated blood from different body parts. The superior vena cava carries blood from upper body parts to the right atrium of the heart, while the inferior vena cava brings blood from the lower body parts to the right atrium. What else? There is another vessel called pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery is also colored with blue. Okay, we know that arteries, they are responsible from carrying oxygenated blood from heart to all body parts. But this one looks like to carry deoxygenated blood. It's because pulmonary artery, by the way, it's the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood from the heart toward the lungs, because it carries the deoxygenated blood toward the lungs in order to for a gas exchange to happen and for a CO2 to be removed and oxygen to be supplied into the blood. There are other vessels like pulmonary vein. You see, pulmonary vein, unlike other veins which carry deoxygenated blood, pulmonary veins that supply the heart with oxygenated blood, because they come from the lungs, and the lungs, there is the process of gas exchange. The blood is oxygenated and then it is delivered to the heart. So it comes from the lungs, that's why it's oxygenated. And also there is another vessel called aorta, the largest one. Let me point it. I want to use a different color. This one, see? This one is the aorta because it's the largest artery. It carries oxygenated blood that's pumped from the left ventricle to all body parts. So this diagram, we just wanted to remind you of the heart structure before starting the cardiac cycle. First, what does a cardiac cycle mean? A cardiac cycle is a series of events that can result in one heartbeat. Okay? How is cardiac cycle initiated? First, to answer this question, you must remember the two notes. What notes? Let me just point them. The sinoatrial node and the atrioventricular nodes. These two nodes, they are involved in the initiation and transmission of electrical signals to heart muscles in order to contract. Because our heart can initiate its own electrical signal without the help of the nervous system. The nervous system, it can regulate the heart rate or the heartbeat, but it doesn't. It's not the source of the electrical signal, no. Because in the heart, there is what? There is a node called sinoatrial node, which is made up of specialized muscle cells. This node, it works or acts as what? A pacemaker. It means it can initiate an electrical signal that can stimulate heart muscles to contract and produce a heartbeat. So the initiation of the electrical signal is by sinoatrial node that's located in the wall of the right atrium. So after the signal is initiated, the signal will stimulate the muscle cells in the wall of both atria to contract. And the atria will contract and the phase is called auricular systole or atrial systole. Now after this, we will explain what happens during that phase. But I just wanted to remind you of these nodes. The other node, which is called the atrioventricular node, it's called atrioventricular because it is located, okay? It is located between the atria and ventricle, in an area between the atria and ventricle, like right here. So that's why it's called atrioventricular node. This node, it doesn't initiate any electrical signal. It's only like a relay center. How does it work as a relay center? This atrioventricular node, after the signal, let's say, has initiated from the sinoatrial node, this one will amplify the signal and will relay or transfer it to what? To the cells lining the wall of ventricles. Okay, the cells found in the wall of the two ventricles. When these cells are stimulated, they will contract. The two ventricles will contract and they will produce a heartbeat. They will pump blood out of the heart. Okay? So this is the two nodes that are involved in what? They are involved in the initiation of an electrical signal that can produce a heartbeat. So now let me use another figure. Okay, I hope everything is clear so far. Okay, so now we have the cardiac cycle. Since it's a cycle, so you can start from any part, it's okay. But it's better to start with what? With atrial systole. You know, the blood is supplied to the heart through, through veins. What veins? Superior vena cava, right? This one. Inferior vena cava, and also pulmonary veins. These two are pulmonary veins. So the blood at first is supplied to the heart where? Into both or through both atria, the right and the left. So the blood is supplied to the heart at first, is delivered to both atria. Now the atria are filled with blood, the blood that has come from body parts, including lungs. This blood, whether it's oxygenated or deoxygenated, it must flow down to where? To both ventricles. But how? The two atria must contract. The two atria must contract in order to pump blood to both ventricles. So this phase is called atrial systole, which simply means, systole means contraction of both atria. Okay? So the two atria will contract. When they contract, they will pump blood toward the ventricles. During this phase, this is an important part. During this phase, the two atrioventricular valves, or in other words, the tricuspid and the mitral valve, they must be open in order for the blood to be pumped into the two ventricles. If they were closed, the blood could not be pumped to the two ventricles by the two atria. At the same time, the two semilunar valves, they will stay closed. They are closed. Okay? They are closed. This is important that you know during each phase which valves are open, which valves are closed, what chambers are contracted, and the direction of blood. This phase, students, it lasts about 0.1 seconds. Okay? Or you can say 0.1 of a second. Now let's go to the next phase. But we must erase our annotations. Okay? Now this is the second phase, which is called ventricular systole. So the second phase. After the blood is pumped into the two ventricles, you remember in the first phase, now the two ventricles are filled with blood. The right ventricle with deoxygenated blood and the left ventricle with oxygenated blood. This blood, it must be pumped out from the heart through blood vessels. For example, the left ventricle is linked with aorta. You see the direction? And the right ventricle will pump blood through the pulmonary arteries to both lungs. And it's deoxygenated, of course. So in order for the blood to be pumped from the ventricles, of course, the two ventricles, their wall must contract, right? They must contract to pump blood forcefully out of the heart through different blood vessels. So this phase is called what? Ventricular systole. Systole again means contraction, and ventricular means ventricles. So it's simply the contraction of ventricles, right? So when they contract, they will pump blood out through these vessels. The left ventricle will pump blood through the aorta to all body parts, and the right ventricle will pump deoxygenated blood through pulmonary arteries to both lungs. So during these two phases, this phase, you see the two atrioventricular valves, they must be closed again. Okay, in the first phase they were open to allow the flow of blood from the atria to the ventricles. Once the ventricles are filled, they must get closed again. If not, then the blood will move backward to the atria. So they must be closed, especially when the ventricles contract, and if they were open, then the blood will be pumped back to the two atria. So they must get closed. But the two semilunar valves, including the pulmonary and the aortic valve, they will be open in order to allow the blood that's pumped by ventricles to move into the vessels, pulmonary arteries and aorta. So this is how it works, the ventricular systole. This phase lasts for 0.3 of a second. The first phase we said 0.1, and this one 0.3. Now till this moment 0.4 of a second time is taken in this cardiac cycle. This is the second phase. The third phase is called the diastole. Now, whenever you start a new phase, you must remember what happened in the previous phase. So in ventricular systole, okay, during ventricular systole, the two ventricles were contracted and the blood was pumped out of the heart. So the two ventricles were contracted. After the heart, okay, has pumped the blood inside its ventricles, now it's time for the heart to relax. The process of relaxation is known as diastole. So diastole is the same as relaxation, especially ventricular relaxation, because in the previous phase the ventricles were contracted. So the ventricles will start to relax and the arteries were already relaxed. Now the whole heart is relaxed. When the heart is relaxed, no contraction, so the blood pressure inside the heart will be lower than in the veins. And so the blood is drawn in, okay, from the veins into the atria, okay? Now the blood has flown back into the two atria, and then from the two atria to the two ventricles, slowly. This process or this phase is called diastole. As you can see, during this phase, what valves are open? The atrioventricular valves are open. They just allow the flow of blood. But the semilunar valves, they must be closed. If not, you remember in the previous phase, they were open because the ventricles contracted, they pumped blood. Now they must get closed in order to prevent the backward flow of blood from the vessels, okay, into the ventricles. So they just prevent the backward flow of blood. And this phase lasts about 0.4 of a second. So the two previous phases, one 0.1, the second phase 0.3, and plus 0.4, the total will be how much? So the total will become 0.8 second. This is the time that's needed for one cardiac cycle to complete. This is what's called cardiac cycle, and here you can see This is when the cardiac cycle is shown digitally. You can see they have abbreviations used like P for auricular systole, QRS for ventricular systole, and NT for diastole. Okay, from here. You should know these labels, this is important. Okay, we have come to the end of this part. I hope you find it useful. We will have other subjects explained in the upcoming days. Feel free to ask for anything, any question in the comment of this video, and do not forget to subscribe the channel, sorry, and you can share it with your friends so that they can get benefit. Thank you so much for your listening, and good luck.